I'm Tara Sinclair, Chief Economist of Indeed. I'm here in beautiful Sunnyvale, California to speak with Yahoo's Senior Vice President of Talent Acquisition, Sandy Gould. I wonder if you could tell me a bit about what brought you to talent acquisition and how you found your way to the position you have now.
Well, I have to warn you that I'm a comic book geek and a sci-fi geek, so it will set the frame for the story. When I was 12 years old, I saw Star Wars in the theaters about 6 times. After the 6th time, I went home and said to my mom, hey, Luke Skywalker knows his destiny. I feel like it's time that I know mine. My mom said, well, you know, you're only 12, but go ahead, take a shot. What's your destiny? And I said, I really believe it's my destiny to help people discover, amplify, and unleash their superpowers and know what their destiny is to create in this life and take on that mission, and I want to help them do that. And honestly, I've been fortunate to be on that mission ever since then. And part of that is seeking out and working for and with companies that view their people as their superpowers and want to do the same thing, really want to expand, explore, and enhance those superpowers. So every company I've worked for has been that way. And I love change and transformation. I think that's where people do their greatest creating. And so that led me to Yahoo.
So in terms of thinking about your next steps, what are the new exciting frontiers you're seeing for yourself, for Yahoo, and for talent acquisition in general?
Well, the great thing when I got here was when I met Marissa, she said she believed in reimagining everything. And that's what she had done building her career. And that really excited me, both because, again, I love imagination. I think it's the center of our identity, and it's the superpower we have to grow the most and cultivate. But as I thought about how would we reimagine recruiting, I realized that we needed to move away from recruiting for jobs, because that time is over. And so instead, we focus, for instance, on growing people's talent, and then we identify the ways in which those superpowers can contribute to our company and its mission, the ways in which we can be a platform for people's growth and to express that creative capability. And then we start to build the idea of a role or a job together. When you do that, you really embed the idea of career development into the recruiting itself. So from the beginning, for instance, our interview approach is, hi, welcome to Yahoo. What do you do? Why do you love it? And where do you want that to lead? By the end of the interview process, we say, well, we've identified opportunity for what you can do in the first 6 months, the next 6 months, and then 12 to 18 months. And now let's start to build that role together. So it's more of a platform and a frame instead of a set of tasks of what you're going to do. Because we all know when you join a company, if you're great and the company's great, the role changes immediately anyway. You both start contributing in different ways to each other's capability. I think the next thing is to start to think about how do you bring community together and generate thought that isn't just controlled by a structural interview process. But as we start to look at ability more and experience as a part, but not so heavily weighted, that means we can have different kinds of interaction. So for instance, we like to build relationship and engagement first before we get into asking questions and understanding task capability. And so I think that means interviews can be reimagined. Recruiting can be reimagined.
I see that as being different from some discussion in the recruiting space that is aimed the other way. How can we speed up the interview process and the time from first application to get the person in the door? It sounds like you're actually talking about potentially elongating that process.
So it's true that the later part of the process, when it comes to getting to know each other, we want to build deeper and perhaps longer on relationships. We do want the process to go fast, so we've actually enacted a lot of processes, like we have one thing that I call 10 days of love, which means from the first on-site interview, it should not be more than 10 days before your offer information goes to offer recommendation and is approved. So we want to make an offer within 10 days of you coming on site first time. Doesn't always happen, but our percentage of it happening is climbing, and we want it to be as total as it can be. Getting people into the pipeline and into the first interview, that has to be super fast. As fast as it can be, and we've actually accelerated it by more than 50% in the last few years. Then the time of deliberation, the 10 days of love as an example, should be fast unless you're considering multiple roles, unless there's organizational change, and or unless you really want to make sure there's a deep design to the way you're lining up someone's career with your business and mission direction.
I'm coming to the talent acquisition space from the economist perspective, and we spend a lot of time digging into data, but this is a really great opportunity to be able to ask you about some of the whys. You're in that space, you're talking with people, and you've got a sense of what's going on. As economists, we're seeing a very slow recovery from the global financial crisis. It does seem like in the US and the UK in particular, we could be heading back to a healthy economy. How do things look to you on the ground?
I think we've definitely learned from the recession of 2008, 2009, and that's changed some behavior for companies as they hire on an ongoing basis, so it's a permanent change. Instead of what I think used to be done, which was you lined up people to tasks. And so if you had 1,000 tasks, you might hire 200 people, assuming they do 5 tasks each. That was very linear and less conservative from a fiscal standpoint. Now, I think everyone's very well versed that markets are going to go up and down. Recessions will come and they will go, and they will repeat. Investment will be very optimistic and go ahead of itself, and then it will cut back and be more conservative as it sees what actual profits occur. So that's changed the hiring modality forever, I think. Now, talking about our time frame, we're in a roaring market. If you look at the stock market, for instance, it's doubled, almost tripled, right? So you have real significant growth in the GDP and in every other factor economically we look at. Unemployment is down. So as you look at those factors, especially in Silicon Valley, the most active market I've ever seen, everyone's definitely aggressive, acquiring talent aggressively. The competition is very high, and it is an employee's market for selection because they're all receiving multiple offers, and competition is strong.
So I'm wondering if there are any particular markets that you're looking at right now, either as potential bright spots or potential areas of concern.
So right now our super active markets, beyond the Silicon Valley market, which is very active, I think that we're seeing great growth in New York, and so we're doing a lot of great talent cultivating there, both growing internal talent and hiring people there. We are seeing really interesting growth in APAC, and so we've taken in a lot of great talent there in the last few years. We're also seeing interesting growth, I think, in terms of the schools that are turning out great talent, for instance, in Mexico. So we're seeing lots of great digital talent come out of new countries as well, who are starting to really get more competitive. We have a tough time, even in the US, finding people who have experience in what we're doing because we're reimagining businesses and new technologies are accelerating. So there's not much experience to be found. Hence, we do a lot more looking at ability and superpower and adaptability as those key experience skills. But that means in the global regions across the globe, they may have even less experience than less experience. And so we have to be thoughtful about that and make sure we're also hiring for ability where we can't find the experience we need. And so that's something we're watching closely. We want to make sure we know how to develop the emergence of the right kinds of skills in those other regions so that as our business out there grows, we don't have a challenge with finding anybody who can do the roles. The second thing is, I think all of us in recruiting and in leadership and HR have learned that you cannot you can't create the solution short term. You have to go look for where you develop talent, how you grow them, how you manage and increase their capability, versus we can just go hire more people to do those other things. That really doesn't work.
That training aspect of finding people with ability and enabling them to fill the roles that you need is so key.
Yep.
As an educator myself, it's really exciting to hear about businesses getting involved and continuing that education lifelong.
Yeah, you know, it's happening as a result of 3 influences. Diversity, where obviously we have a shortage and we want so much more. And our business, I mean, we believe that difference plus imagination equals innovation. So we must have continuous flows of different thinkers and people with different experiences and backgrounds because we're going to be innovating all the time.
What are some things you've learned about identifying potential in a market and building on that?
I think the number one lesson is in every market and in every situation and with every person or community, you're going to be able to decode what matters most to them, what actually creates the most value for people. And as cliche as that might sound, that's actually the secret sauce. It's not about wages. It's not about special benefits. It's not about work from home. It actually turns out to be a very specific code around what is it that gives that individual, that community, or people in that region the greatest amount of meaning. And so as an example for us in Silicon Valley, we are competing with the best companies in the world. I think everybody knows that. And we have seen ourselves grow from being at the bottom of the competitive stack to now being at the top and fighting with all the big players. And how we've done it is we focused on what kind of meaning was being sought out in our key markets. I ask all new hires, because I meet all new hires every Monday, and I say, why did you choose Yahoo? It's the first question I ask them. And they share their stories, and the common theme is the team cared about me, got to know me, I felt connected to them, and they asked me about what I cared about doing, and then they told me about career opportunity down the road. And so those 2 things are really making the difference. And that's really, for me, that's decoding what delivers meaning to our candidates and to our employees and to our populations. Once you know that, you can build all the other mechanisms and tools, including compensation, to be really competitive, but that's your differentiator, and that's what matters the most.
I know you said, and I completely agree, that if you can tailor a package for a particular candidate, that's going to be very impactful and effective for attracting them, particularly if they really are the right fit for your company. And those value propositions definitely are compelling to candidates. But one thing we see as economists is that wages still matter a great deal. When you ask people, they say that salary, location, and flexibility are the top 3 things that matter in the decision to accept an offer. How do you think about those things as you work to attract and retain talent?
Sure. So I would break flexibility out into 3 areas. There's flexibility in your identity at work, there's flexibility in how you create at work, and there is flexibility in where you are when you're working. So flexibility and identity, I think the most successful thing a company can do is make sure there is as little corporate artifice to the identity of somebody who's been invited into the company to create. So basically, the more authentic the culture, the more authentic you or I can be if we work there, the more honestly and powerfully we are going to create. Because the more work and the company will become part of my core identity. I won't feel like I have to create something artificial or separate and different. And so that to me is a core concept. And that means people can dress how they want. It means people get to be who they are. It means diversity is welcome and celebrated. The second flexibility is how you create. And that one to me it might even be more important. And that means you should not, as in a corporate environment, overstructure the way people deliver their results. So focus more on telling them and guiding them as to the what, although also employees should be involved in deciding what the what is. But then on the how, you've got to give them as much freedom to collaborate, to experiment, to explore, to fail as possible, and let them innovate. So the third one, flexibility and location. So we have great flexibility in one way, and then we actually avoid flexibility in another where we think it can be dilutive. The great flexibility is people get to be where they want in the working environment to work. So if they're in this office, they can come over here where nobody is when they want to do some jam sessions. They can get together in a conference room and do it together. If they have a special project and they need to work off-site, so they have 8 or 10 or 12 straight hours of work, uninterrupted to get ready for something big that's happening, I want them to do it. And especially in recruiting and in sales, you need people to be able to do that because they're engaging the outside world, not just the inside of the company. On the flip side, we don't actually let people have jobs at home with exceptions. There are exception jobs that do need to be at home or they're often remote locations. But the reason we don't want jobs actually being at home the entire time is we lose the collaboration benefit. And we are more powerful together than we are singularly. That's the idea of any community and certainly our company. So while there are a number of jobs throughout the company that are actually distributed and at home, based on the nature of the job, again, recruiting is an example, sales is an example, support is an example. They need to be in the region and customer facing. Beyond that, we ask people to be in offices because the more they're working together, the more we can innovate. And as an example, since we actually instituted that 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, right, where it is I joined the company, we have seen more innovation come out of the company than ever before, and in many, many years. And that's because people are interacting, and when you interact, people catalyze ideas in each other. They challenge each other, they change their thinking together, and they connect. And we all know that really successful companies are really tightly connected as a community.
So in terms of thinking about this customization of a package that attracts a job seeker, do you wrestle at all with different perspectives on inequality with wages or the types of opportunities that you're making available to some and not to others?
Sure. So, this is the trick of balancing where you standardize and where you individualize. You have to standardize for fairness. People doing the same role with the same general capability and experience should probably be paid the same. Once they start performing differently, then we have the right to deviate their compensation and should to reward different levels of performance, right? So that way everyone is in a meritocracy and is incented to do better, greater work. Obviously, we are a company that is proud of the fact that one of our diversity statistics that is higher than a lot of our competitors is female presentation and presence, all the way from the leadership level, all the way through the company. And that's very important to us. So it's a good example of where we're trying to really make sure that that pay is equal and competitive. And from what I know, we're doing a really good job at that. However, I want to be really clear. No one's doing as good a job as we all should be because the world is catching up on this, right? We're all catching up on this. Our country is hopefully going to catch up on this. And so we need to therefore be really vigilant to make sure we're always continually evolving that.
So one of the things that we're really seeing today is that people are always job seekers and they have many options. How do you think about retaining that top talent that may have just started with you but are already being recruited by a competitor?
Great question. So we have 3 ways in our strategy we are actually managing that. Number 1, you and I already talked about, which is open the recruiting process with what do you do, why do you love it, where do you want it to lead? So embed career development in the very beginning. I remember years ago I learned when I was onboarding executives that you should start onboarding them in the 3rd interview when you know they're going to get hired because you don't have a lot of time and executives are always told they have to hit the ground running. But I think we're now learning the error of those ways, and we're onboarding more. We're learning that executives are actually the ones you have to teach early because they have so much responsibility. So we start career development from that opening interview. And by the end of the interview process, we will be having conversations about what the path could be down the road. The second thing is, though, we actually have built a team on my team that's called Internal Talent Mobility. And their role is to create a very active internal marketplace where we are actively recruiting our best talent as our competitors are. So you have to be doing it as quickly as they're doing it, even ahead, right? And so that's just kicking off, but we're really excited about that because that is a huge edge. And what we want, our goal is that our talent is walking around here going, I just had a great quarter and I know I'm gonna get a call from an internal recruiter because I know there are people talking about me. Aligned to that, we do this thing called talent brokering, where every quarter when we do our quarterly reviews, after we're done doing the performance reviews, all the leaders talk about the top talent because it's fresh on their mind because they just give everybody performance ratings. So we take the top people and we say, okay, what are we all doing with them? Are we activating them enough? Do we know where they're going next? Have we given them a challenge? When's the last time they got a new comp? Like, we review the whole construct. And so that keeps it fresh on people's minds. And that leads to a third and fourth thing we're doing. The third thing is we're telling them about those conversations, which companies didn't used to do. So companies used to not say, hey, I wanted to let you know that we just had a great meeting about you and you're one of the people everyone's watching and we'd love to pull you into some things. The reason they didn't is if they didn't pull them into something, they didn't want to disappoint them. But that was a loss because they didn't know they were considered. It's better to say, we're considering you. Maybe something comes up now, maybe it comes up next quarter, but know that you're on the VIP list, right? That's a much better situation. And then the other thing we're doing is we're heightening that exposure. So in addition to socializing those people with our peers across the org, we're also making sure that, for instance, my team does this thing where every month we have an all-hands meeting. So now 1 month of those months, every few months, will be dedicated purely to career development. And we'll have everybody have conversations, all managers with their people, and then we'll ask people to come forward in the meeting and talk about what they've been working on and how their growth is going. And we tie it to a metric. So I have a metric for my team, which is I must grow 20% of the team every year. And so every quarter we look and say, okay, how far along are we? Last year we hit it, we'll hit it again this year. And so the company, in fact, last year moved about 25% of our filled positions were with internals. And that's actually a great number. And so those are numbers we're striving for, and we'll continue to. If it matters, you will make a metric around it and you will reward people on it, and that will sustain it. But let's also be clear, all employees own their career development. We should just be their co-pilot. They own 51%, we own 49%. But if we're smart, we will move them into our key roles and growth roles because that's where the opportunity and the great creating will be. So I think everyone's starting to get, you really have to activate your internal group. And we call it Yahoo first, meaning we actually want jobs filled by Yahoos first internally. And that, I think, as we start to expand that and do things like invite-only job fairs, speaker series where they can sit down with executives and ask what those execs are looking for and then plan their career growth, I think it's really going to help us. And similar to what I said to you before, we're focusing on helping people develop their superpowers, not just get job A or job B or title C, but also what superpowers do you have that you want to exploit more and what new ones do you want to develop? And then let's give you in-job assignments to get you moving in that direction.
It's really great to hear you talking so much about values, skills, and abilities, because that's definitely something we're seeing from the job seekers. They're really shifting in the way that they're characterizing themselves, and it's less about job title and more now about skills and interests.
When I got here, I was thrilled to find out that every week, Marissa and her executive staff just automatically say, what are our 3 top challenges this week? Okay, who's doing the best work across the company that we can draft into those jobs? And that has happened quite a bit, actually. More than half her team now is people that have been drafted over time, her executive direct team. And so you want that. Half my leadership team is actually people who've grown up here and been drafted now as opportunities came up or people moved on. And so you really want that, and if that example is being set, then it actually gets followed, and other people will mimic it because they see it and know it's a way to success. And so that's very important. It's just one of those things that it can't just be one group drives it for the whole company. It has to be holistic and pervasive.